Hey everyone, it's great to have you back. Welcome to another Adventure Box podcast brought to you by Historical Conquest. Now, here's some great things to know. We are just talking about slavery this week. So the textbook has 1 week for slavery, 1 week for Native Americans, indigenous people, 1 week for religious people, and 1 week for immigration. So this week is everything we're going to be talking about with slavery, but we always mix it into all the other topics as it was happening. But I want to give you an update that's basically what to look forward to. Next week it's indigenous. The week after that is the religious, and after that it's immigration. And then we pop over to the new time. We're going to be talking about the War of 1812. And from there, then we get into the Wild West and the expansion westward. So stay tuned for all that. Excited to talk to you about it. And just so you know, this is the wrong one. Not actually holding up this is our textbooks. They are on, this one's on ancient Persia, but it's got like everything you want to know about ancient Persia. Boom, right there. Right next to me I have the American Revolution as well. I did not bring with me the Birth of the Nation. It's actually up on my shelf. Now here's the cool thing. If you look at the bindings of all of these, there's something special that if you put all of them in order all the way across, you're going to see something special in there. Just letting you know. Okay, on to today. We're still talking about slavery, but now we talk about the resistance, politics, abolitionists. That's right. We talk about the best parts in the topics of slavery. I don't know if I could say the best parts. I can say the best parts because it's a lot better than slavery itself. Here we go. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about, the most powerful struggle that basically America's ever had. This is the resistance to slavery, the politics of battling over slavery, and the rise of the abolitionist movement. We're going to basically get you all the way to the Civil War, but we're not going to get you all the way there. So the resistance talks about how the enslaved people fought back. Politics is going to be talking about the politics in the law, in the government. And then the abolitionist movement is all those that were fighting against slavery. Okay, this again brings us up to the Civil War, but we're not talking about the Civil War because that's a topic all upon itself. Okay, here we go. Segment 1. Let's talk about the resistance and the rebellion. So, despite the brutality of slavery, enslaved people resisted in every way possible. They ran away, and they rebelled in the sense of fighting back violence. Now, these were not just quiet defiance. These were pretty subtle acts of defiance. These were anything from running away and being quiet about it to full-on revolt. And these were individuals as well as full movements. Okay, so let's talk about the everyday acts of resistance. So many enslaved people found ways to fight back in daily life. Yeah, it wasn't just these big things that you heard about. There's a lot of different small things, such as breaking tools, slowing down work on plantations. Oh, sorry, the plow broke. Well, what are you going to do when the plow breaks? A lot of times, those that were enslaved were not given tools to fix those things because they didn't want them to be used as weapons. So you had to bring over another white colonist to come over and fix that plow. Well, that was great. And then a week later, oh, it broke again. Sorry, slows you down. Now, here's the problem though. A lot of times when you did that as a slave, you'd be beaten. But here's the interesting thing. You might be beaten, but everyone else that's held down, they weren't there. They didn't do it. They had no part of it. So most of the time, they were free to have time off to some extent. No. They'd always find work for you to do. But it held up the plantation. And while the one that was running the plow would be brutally beaten, the others sometimes were able to get in less work and such. So there's always consequences to every one of these resistance or rebellions. How about pretending to be sick to avoid labor? Yeah, but you'd probably be beaten as well. which didn't really help on getting you better, would it? No, not really. Or you'd be forced to work. So you really had to, like, you really had to pretend hard that you were really sick, that there's no way that you could work because a cold, nah, that wouldn't be enough. Flu, no, it still probably make you work. It'd have to be something pretty bad. And at that point, it was probably hard to really pretend that. Now here's another one. Another type of rebellion didn't have anything to do with the work. It was secret learning to read and write, despite the law was against it. Now here's an interesting thing. On a lot of plantations, not all, not even a majority, small amount of plantations, you could actually find people that would teach you. Whether it was the neighbor boy or it was the girl inside the plantation, the daughter, or even the wife. She would come out and teach you how to read and write. There's a lot of different accounts of this happening. Even though the law said you couldn't do that, because those that were outside of that plantation did not want everyone else to rise up. You teach one person to read and write, they're going to teach the next one, they're going to teach the next one, and then you have the possibility of a full-on rebellion. Here's another way. Spirituals, religious songs, often carried hidden messages about escaping or coded directions to safe places. They were found in the songs that they were shared. Now this brings up a really interesting part that everyone's heard about, or most people have heard about. It's called the Underground Railroad. This is where runaways would find certain paths in order to get themselves up to freedom in the North. Now, here's the interesting thing, is that a lot of people started moving in these underground railroads. The owners basically lost all of their slaves, and by running away, and they had to go after them. Well, if they were up in the North, there were no laws. And a lot of the people up there were very empathetic to those that were enslaved. So many fugitives fled to Canada. If not for the North, they fled as far as Canada. Spanish Florida, they could actually go south. Spain did not allow slavery at that time. And so you could actually get down there and be free. Or the Native American communities. Now, here's something interesting to learn about the Native American communities. They also used Africans as slaves. So you could go to that, but you'd be treated a lot better in the Native American land. And if you became Native American property, those slave owners would probably try to attack your village, but it would be a battle between them, because that African that came over to you would now be your quote-unquote property. Now, there were also different communities that they could go off to. They were called the maroon communities. These were hidden settlements of escaped enslaved people, especially in the swampy areas and also in the mountains, like the mountains of the Appalachians or the swampland of Louisiana. The Underground Railroad created a secret network of like safe houses and guides, people that would bring you through and show you where to go. They helped thousands of Africans escape, maybe up to 10,000 or more Africans escaping. Some of these people, actually one of the very first ones, her name was Harriet Tubman. She's one of the great heroes of American history. She risked her life to get out of slavery, but when she became free, then she's like, I feel the need to go back and find others that I can save as well. And so they were able to bring them up. Now, interesting, some of these people that rebelled in the Underground Railroad, they forged papers. Now, these were not just Africans that forged these papers. No, they had white helpers that would actually, or European helpers, white because he could have been from other places, but European helpers that were colonists that helped them forge papers, create disguises, or even ship them, including in boxes. What? Yeah, so you put a crate on your wagon and you bring it up to a place. Well, unless there's some sort of crime that's being punished, you're not going to allow someone to, if you're a European, if you're a colonist, and you say, you're not going after my crate, stay away from that crate, people have to follow by the law, which they couldn't just search and seize you. If they were the British, they could. So it became a sticking point. But after the American Revolution, then they couldn't. unless they were federal agents or officers. Now, the state militia could also do it, and that's where they became all these laws, which we're going to get into in just a few minutes. Let's talk about some of the rebellions that happened. You had the Stono Rebellion, 1739. Enslaved people in South Carolina killed plantation owners and tried to escape to Spanish Florida. A lot of them were killed, sadly. Then you had a planned revolt called the Gabriel's Rebellion, 1800, where they revolted in Virginia, inspired by the Haitian Revolution down in Haiti. There, they were actually able to break free and create their own civilization, their own communities down there. But this Gabriel Rebellion was stopped before it really began. So it didn't really go anywhere. Let's see. You also had, well, that's Civil War I was thinking of. Let's go to the Denmark Vesey plot. This is a former enslaved man in Charleston organized a massive uprising, but it was betrayed before it started. You had one slave that betrayed them in order to get his freedom. He turned everyone else in. And there was a brutal beating afterwards. Now, here's one that you might have heard of. It's called the Nat Turner's Rebellion. 1831, the largest and deadliest slave revolt. Now, this is after the colonies became states. This is where Turner, Nat Turner, and his followers killed 55 whites before being captured. They were fighting for their freedom and basically getting revenge for a lot of people. So those were some of the uprisings that were crushed, but they tried to do that. So let's talk about the politics. Sorry, my nose is itchy. Okay, let's talk about the politics. Slavery wasn't just an economic system. It was a political battleground. As Americans expanded, the government struggled to balance free states from slave states. You had the North, which were normally free states, and you had the South, which was normally slave states. But what happens when you get more states in between? So some of the early legal battles, let's just start off with slavery was legalized in the colonies at the 1700s, okay? You learned that part last time. This is when tensions over the morality grew. Again, 1700s, during the American Revolution and afterwards, that's when, and when the government solidified itself, that's when they started to create actual laws that made it available for freedom for those up in the North, and down in the South, slaves to become officially slaves to this new country, in this new country. So some northern states gradually abolished slavery. It took them some time, but by the 1787, it's basically when all of slavery was banned up in the North. So the Northwest Ordinance, this is what it's called, 1787, Northwest Ordinance, banned slavery in any new territories north of the Ohio River. Despite this, the South economy depended on slavery, and so they were still able to bring new slaves in, and this continued the legal battle for decades after that. Let's go to the next one, which is, so 1787, you had the Northwest Ordinance. How about the Missouri Compromise? Now, Missouri was joining on, and in that joining on, you had free states that wanted them to join on as a free state, and you had the slave states that wanted to become a slave state, because the more states you had, the more electoral votes you had. So in 1819, Missouri applied for statehood as a slave state, but this threatened the balance. There were slave states and there were non-slave states, and at this point they were balanced between the two, equal representation in the U.S. Congress. So they compromised. They said Maine could become a state as a free state, and this kept it 12-12. It also banned slavery in the North above the 36-degree, 30 foot latitude line. So basically in the Louisiana Purchase and straight down the continent horizontally. If it was above that latitude, then it would be freedom for enslaved people or for Africans. If it was below that line, then it was slavery for Africans. So this temporarily eased tensions between the North and the South, and the joining on of Missouri. Now, fugitive laws. Now, here's something to understand. Okay, so we went a little bit ahead to tell you about the compromises. Let's go a little bit back. The Fugitive Slave Act, it was in 1793, required escaped enslaved people to be returned to their owners. Again, quote unquote owners. Then, the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850 made it easier for bounty hunters, captors, to capture runaways in free states. And so this is where these laws basically angered abolitionists and led to a violent resistance. So you have two new revolts that happen. One is called the Christiana riots in 1851. This is up in Pennsylvania. A Pennsylvania town defended an escaped enslaved man from these slave captors. So these people, captors, were actually like bounty hunters, where they went up and captured slaves and brought them down south. Well, this Pennsylvania town, boom, completely against it. And they kept that enslaved person, or that formerly enslaved person who escaped, safe. But this is when it went to the courts. There's also another one called the jury rescue in same year, 1851, 1 year after the new slave law went into play, and the bounty hunters could go after the slaves. This one, abolitionists freed a fugitive from jail in New York after he'd been captured. So they rescued him and made him disappear. This is after he was captured, brought into jail to be shipped down south. Well, these people rioted, took over the jail, freed the escapee, and made him disappear. As the South pushed to expand slavery, the North increased its opposition. And again, this led to a lot of political unrest. Also, the strengthening of what we call abolitionists or abolitionism. This is where people wanted slaves to be freed. So, as the fight over slavery intensified, more Americans joined the abolitionist movement and demanded that there was an end. So let's talk about the early movers. Now this is really cool. One of the earliest religious groups to come to the Americas, everyone knows them, they're called the Quakers. If you like Quaker Oats, their mascot is the Quakers because that's where it started. If they try to change that for any reason, still no, it's the Quakers that started the oatmeal movement. Anyways, okay. They opposed slavery all the way back as far as the 1600s. So this is before 1654, I think it was, when the courts ruled that the indentured servant, the African indentured servant, could now become a permanent slave to another former African indentured servant, which is a really sad state of mind. Okay, so by the 1800s, abolitionist societies had spread across the North, printing newspapers, books, speeches. They were even down the South, but that's where you'd probably get lynched if you were caught as an abolitionist trying to fight for this freedom for the Africans. So free black communities played a huge role in this as well, leading the efforts to educate, to rescue, and to fight against slavery and rescuing fugitives. So this was like Harriet Tubman's time to send people back down, pick up new enslaved people, bring them up north, and try to make them free. Now, these communities were heavily watched by those bounty hunters that I talked about just recently. Okay, let's talk about some of the key abolitionists that you probably all know. By a man named He was a former enslaved man. He became a writer, speaker, and activist. You may know him as the publisher of the North Star, an abolitionist newspaper. He also fought to abolish slavery and to create black civil rights. What was his name? His name was none other than Frederick Douglass. He was a great man who was well respected by those in the North and fought for other people to be freed and fought for more people to be educated on slavery and the evils of slavery. What's another one? Her name was Sojourner Truth, or at least that's what they called her. Her name is Isabel Pumphrey. You might know her, and actually Frederick Douglass, in the game Historical Conquest. So she also was a formerly enslaved woman who spoke across the country and delivered famous speeches, including, "Ain't I a woman?" So she was for black rights, but she was also for women's rights. Well, it was more of the fact of black rights because she was a woman, and women were getting more rights as well. So these were the abolitionist movement and the women's rights movement basically around the same time. How about William Lloyd Garrison, founded of the Liberator, a radical newspaper demanding immediate abolition. So just abolishing all slavery right away. William Lloyd Garrison, also in the game, very well known. Now here's one you might not know. This is the Grimke sisters. These were white women from slave owner families who became powerful anti-slave activists. The Grimke sisters. You'll actually read about them in the textbook. Now, the abolishment movement expanded during this time. You would think that it would be shrinking because of the abolitionist movement, but no, it was actually getting more powerful at the time. By the 1830s and 1840s, abolitionists helped pass personal liberty laws, we'll call them. This making it harder to capture fugitives in free states. This is why they actually created in 1850 the Fugitive Slave Act, the second one, which made it easier on a federal level. Now, the Underground Railroad expanded during this time, and with more secret networks, helping enslaved people not just get up north, but down to Florida, over to the Indian communities, anything to get them out of the plantations, basically. At the same time, they also faced a lot of violence. Pro-slavery mobs would turn against them, burn their presses, destroy them, even tarring and feathering those that were anti-slavery activists. They did anything to make them fear the slave owners or those that supported slavery. So by the mid-1800s, abolitionists had turned slavery from an acceptable institution into a national crisis. Now, we're not going to go over the Civil War. Civil War was a little bit more than this, but it was mostly on slavery. But we're going to go over that later on when we talk about the Civil War. So let's recap a little bit of what we talked about. The resistance to slavery was long and fierce. It was very hard, not just for the, well, we're going to put it this way. Don't take this the wrong way. The slave owners, so the rebellion was very hard on the slave owners, but it was also very hard on the slaves as well, those that stayed slaves. And those that ran away made it a lot harder on them as well. But at the same time, it was those that ran away that later on would come down and help those people find their slavery as well. So it was a mixing pot. I mean, if you didn't leave slavery because you feared for everyone else, there would never have been a movement out of there. Harriet Tubman left, and those that also worked for that family might have gotten hurt. But it was because Harriet Tubman did leave that she was able to come back and free everyone else after she had that engagement, after she had known that it was possible. Another one, slavery was not just an economic system. We talked about this at the very beginning. It was a political crisis. It was a moral debate, and it was a movement towards freedom. Remember, Bill of Rights. The Americans, the colonists who became Americans, wanted freedom. They wanted personal freedoms. So they created the Bill of Rights. This movement only helped the slaves find their freedom at some point, because the document that is the Constitution and what is the Bill of Rights basically spoke for freedom and personal freedoms for everyone in the Americas. And the abolitionists took that to note. And that's when they went after everyone possible to be able to free as many people as possible. So I got an engagement question for you, an activity question for you. What do you think was the most powerful form of resistance in slavery? I'm going to let you think about that. I can give you one. What was the most powerful form of resistance to slavery? Well, let me think. Tools could be fixed. Sickness, you never stay sick forever. What was the other resistance that they had early on? And escaping, you would find others, or you'd send others to capture those slaves and bring them back into slavery. So, that being said, what was the most powerful form of resistance? We talked about those three. What were other ways of resistance that you can think of? Or maybe even, how about this? If you were a slave, I want you to think about this. If you were a slave, if you were on a plantation and you became a slave, how would you fight back? Please put that in the notes below or in the comments below. We'd love to see what you have to say. Email us if you don't feel, or if you're not allowed to, put them in the comments below. Email me. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much for joining me on this great Adventure Box podcast day. I hope you enjoyed this. Catch us tomorrow when we're talking about more into into Greece. That is ancient history. Mondays and Wednesdays is American history. Tuesdays and Thursdays is ancient history. So thanks so much for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. Bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.